Hey everybody, it's Peter again from Wargaming with Peter. I guess this is
Hello.
not technically our dawn patrol, which is usually on the weekend. I don't really have a name for this podcast, but I have Piotr. I hope I pronounced that properly, considering
Yeah.
you are my Polish namesake, I assume. Uh, so just tell me a little bit about By Fire and Sword 2. Why why the need for a new version? Um, Maybe let's start with what has changed significantly enough to warrant a new version, and we'll start from there.
Yeah, sure. So first, hi. Hi, I'm Piotr from Wargamer Game Studios, and I'm co-author of second edition of By Fire and Sword. And we decided to make this new edition for a few reasons. First of all, first edition, while it was a nice, fun game and really well historically based game. It had its problems mostly because of the time when it was created. The gaming moved on a bit. We have some uh, new mechanisms used in gaming and new experiences that we wanted to adapt it and make it also more friendly for gamers, while keeping it as historically accurate as possible. So we decided to implement things like alternate activation, which was one of the biggest changes in the game. We implemented unit cards to help navigate resources and statistics of the units. We decided to give up on some very detailed aspects of the game to make it more fluent, killing some darlings that were quite nice and give that nice feeling of it worked like that, but it clogged the game too much,
Mhm.
make it too slow if we implemented such detailed things on such big scale of the battle. I will use the example of the rules for some defensive obstacles that negatively affected armor of the units behind it, to represent that wooden obstacles could be dangerous for people defending against firepower, just because of small pieces of the wood damaging the soldiers. It was nice, it was fun, but it was too many of such detailed rules make it too slow if you want to play larger battles, not just skirmish games, and
Mhm.
still have still be able to play a game within few hours, not a whole day.
Right.
So
The one thing that I think is appealing to it is that it seems approachable to a newcomer to the period and or the scale. I think. It what is the intention? Can you give me a little bit of the intention from like what's the best way for somebody to get into it if they wanted to like maybe start with a skirmish? Like what types? How much would they need to particularly invest in order to start from scratch if they don't have their own miniatures?
so we have the best entry point to the game is two-player starter set that has skirmish for Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth forces and for Ottoman Empire. And there are those armies that are in this set are ready to play skirmish forces for both those armies. You don't need to add anything to have a viable army, but of course you can expand it with more things. But
Mhm.
you open this set and you have everything. Just assemble the miniatures and you have everything you need to start to play. There are also movement trays for the units, rulebook, basic scenario, all the tokens, rangefinders, things like that. That you some markers to mark
Mhm.
objectives on the battlefield, so you can start and play. And D10 dice, because in By Fire and Sword we use 10-sided dice. It gives us well better spread of statistics to have for our units.
Right. And we'll get into some of the basic mechanics here in a little
Yeah,
bit.
sure.
I really like, and I think this might be something that you were kind of talking to before. I like modern miniature wargaming has gotten a little bit better over time at trying
Yeah,
to give the player, as much information as possible on unit cards. I like that you went that way. Like just similar systems like Blucher and by Sam Mustafa and
yeah,
other folks of late. Um, I think it's a really good. It's good for introducing people to wargaming in general too. It's just that everything you need is kind of on a card. Um, so the um, the Kickstarter itself. Let's switch over to that just for 1 second.
yeah, sure.
I meant to show that too. We'll kind of go through it a little bit, kind of show people what the levels are, what's
Yeah, of
included.
course.
And then we'll kind of go back over to the rules here. Sorry. Let me get my Chrome going and let's get in here. Hopefully, I assume you're seeing the Kickstarter now. See, it looks like I just boosted you by a small amount. I'm just kidding. So let's go through what the basic pledge level is. Is there a way to get yourself into the starter set?
Yeah, you have 3 pledge levels, and the first one is for a set of books, because
Mhm.
we decided to split one giant tome into 4 smaller books that would be more easier to use during the gaming. So we have the main rule book that is in a beta version available to download.
Mhm.
Uh, and it's less than half of the old one. We have a scenario book, and there's also available beta version of a scenario book with one scenario for skirmish level and one for task force level. And in this pledge, there are also 2 tomes of our armies book. In each of the tomes, there are 5 main forces that we include in our game. One is more Western armies and Polish Commonwealth oriented. The other one is more oriented around Ottoman Empire, Transylvania, Tatars, Moscow, and Cossacks.
Okay. Very good.
So you can have your everything about the armies is in there, and of course with each unit there is a card for the miniatures in the box. But this pledge level also allows you to switch from this book set into the single player starter set. Or there is the other pledge that allows you to take larger single player starter set, because we have them depending on the armies
Mhm.
into prices. And there is also a third pledge that allows you to take a 2-player starter set, which is, as I said, the best way to get into game. So it's ready to play. And there is also a retailer pledge for any shops that would like to partner with us with our game.
Awesome.
And there are a lot of add-ons that you can take because we have quite a large line of miniatures right now.
Yeah, that was my next question for these. In particular, for the army lists that you provide, you pretty much have miniatures for all the compositions of these army books, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. During the first edition, there were a lot of miniatures produced for the game, and now we are updating them. There are a lot of new sculpts added to the units. Some units are totally resculpted. Some units are completely new, introduced to the second edition. In some cases, it was just commanded musketeers in Holy Roman Empire, for example. In the first edition, it was just a special rule that could be added to some musketeer company. In the second edition, it is a separate unit with its own miniatures in loose formation.
And are these? Have you branched out as far as the sculptors that you're working on, or is it all in house, or do you have you been kind of like expanding your base of sculptors and so forth?
Well, we have few sculptures that we work with. There are 4 artists that works for us from Poland, and
I think what I was thinking of there is, are you using the same sculptors you had for the previous?
There are some new sculptures and some old sculptures that continue to work with us on the game, but there is also a bit of new fresh style but everything is still hand sculpted as far as miniature goes, and well, it gives it uniqueness of that human hand sculpt has this feel. I both like digital sculpts and old style hand sculpts, but those have that feeling. You can see that it is hand sculpted.
They're very detailed. So these are mostly it's a mixture of both, or is it all 3D?
No, all is hand sculpted. No 3D sculpts as far as the soldiers in this game.
We'll get a little bit. I'll come back to the Kickstarter page just before we sign off, just to kind of summarize what people can get and so forth.
Yeah, there are about 100 of add-ons available to pick from. Because we wanted as much available from the first edition in the second edition too. Though you'll get, if you support on Kickstarter and pick some units from the Kickstarter, you'll get them far before they will be released in their second edition release schedule.
Okay. Kind of speaking of Kickstarter versus the full release or later hobby store releases, how, like, in interim, like if somebody misses the Kickstarter, what's the best way to seek out the miniature box sets? Are there particular distributors that you are working with in Europe, and then do you have particular distributors you're working with in North America? What's the best way for somebody to seek you out post Kickstarter?
Yeah, so We have online store both in Europe, and we have our US department.
Okay.
So it is available to order for US and for Europe. The link to the shop is easy to get on our website
Okay.
of the game. So there should be no problem, though for now we can only order first edition sets.
Right. Right.
And well, as far as the when the second edition reach the detail, we hope it will be first half of next year, but of course we will prioritize
To
sending
get
the
started.
Kickstarter
Yeah.
orders.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that was my next question. So, very good. Let me go back to the rules real quick. Just wanted to kind of give people an idea. I wanted to talk a little bit about the task force.
Of course.
Hopefully this works. Okay. Yeah, maybe just kind of run me through like a typical preliminary to, and again, this is the scenario book. This is the beta scenario book, which you can get all of these books on the Kickstarter site. I'm assuming the Kickstarter page will always be there no matter what. You know what I'm saying? Like once the Kickstarter is done, it's not going to disappear, and people can at least check out the beta format of the rules. Are there going to be any significant differences in the final version versus these beta files, or
I don't think so. We
Right.
mostly think about some clarification in case of some rules were unclear for the readers.
Okay.
Some minor mistakes that we hope people will catch, and already we will notified of some. So we
Okay.
will be updating it. Well,
That's a
it
great
always work better when community gets involved.
Yeah.
So we
That's a
decided
great
to
way to
work together.
beta test it. So that's nice. It's very nice. So describe to me a little bit about just the basic steps of the task force approach to. This is basically, I would consider this probably what grand tactical maneuvering prior to the battle, and it kind of sets up the sequence, the end results being, the format of your tactical battle. Maybe just walk me through just a little bit of preparing this and just some of the main steps here if you want.
Sure. So the task force is that main level of the game that we look for. This is the full experience of the game. So the first thing is to prepare your armies. You build your army in secret from your opponent, and the only information your opponent gets at the beginning is how strong is your army in points, because you don't have to play on the same point level. You just decide that, okay, we're playing skirmish or we're playing task force, and armies can be asymmetric to each other.
Uh-huh.
And also enemy will know whether your army is cavalry army, mixed army, or foot army, and it is defined by the proportion of mounted units to infantry units, or even presence of infantry units, when dragoons are counted as cavalry. So then you set up a battlefield, and after this is done, you go to the scenario phase. So both of the players, knowing only that enemy is either stronger or weaker than them, and whether and the type of their army, choose the stance, whether they are aggressive or careful. Cautious, and depending of the combination of the posture of the armies, you will the blue player, which is the player that has weaker army, chooses a scenario from appropriate place in the table, in the matrix.
Mhm.
Some scenario may have point costs, and that means that you need to pay for that scenario with the difference between your strength of your armies. Some costs 0 points, so you can always choose those scenarios. And to balance the difference between the armies, there are random effects that can be randomly generated from the table. And also, if you open the scenario page, there are also one more page further. I think one more. Oh, here. There is a table of advantages that can be also picked by a blue player to balance the game. So you can gain the ability to pass in the during your activation, ability to position your units farther than your deployment zone, affect the deployment of objectives, things like that.
Very good. Very good.
And but
As
so
far
you
as
choose the scenario thinking, okay, I have, for example, I have infantry army, my opponent has mounted army, okay, so I'll take cautious stance. Then I'll take a scenario that would be well for me to defend against mobile forces. And if the difference is large between us, I could still affect that with some few advantages for me. In case of similar strength, the blue player is determined randomly, and because of no difference in points,
Mhm.
it will be impossible to pick a very favorable scenario for one of the players. But you can still affect that okay, I have infantry army, so I'll take cautious stance not to attack
Mhm.
not to be forced to pick some very mobile scenarios.
Mhm. Mhm.
Then is the reconnaissance phase that takes place before the deployment of the armies. So first thing is the vanguard. Each army on task force has a vanguard unit, which is deployed before rest of the army, and you can choose action that vanguard will take. You can hold them and not sending them forward, which will negatively affect your possibilities to choose reconnaissance effects, but is safe for that unit. And you have to deploy it within your deployment zone. If you decide to send your vanguard forward, then you can deploy it either with its rear edge in contact with the edge of your deployment zone. So
Okay.
you gain the depth of the
Mhm.
movement tray, and
Mhm.
you will be able to pick two effects instead of one for reconnaissance phase. But you will have to roll for whether the unit will be affected with some disorder points, because they're taking the risk of that reconnaissance actions. And you can make it more aggressive, which will allow you to make additional reposition movement by 2 inches, but it will increase the difficulty of the test for disorder points. And You can act very aggressive, which will allow you to make full movement with that unit speed. Usually it's cavalry, so it's quite some gain before the battle. But the danger is real, so we can start the game even with the unit more than half
Mhm.
depleted.
So from what I can tell, there,
Mhm.
there's a nice uniqueness to everything that you can do, or kind of buy out of this and vie for. But it's not. I mean, it's small effects, but it's nice. It's kind of it
Yeah,
gives
they
you
are
something.
allow you that bit feeling that okay, my army is mobile, my army is uh, well prepared for battle in the terrain. They know where there are some rules for some armies that they fight on their own ground, which allows them to affect that phase also, and gives that bit of flanking maneuver,
Right.
first march for some units. Some skirmishing before to reflect some skirmishing before battle, things
I
like
like
that.
this. Yeah, I like the decoy effect. That's one of the first times I've seen that used in a rule set. I mean, there might be some rules that use it, but this is the first time I've seen it in a miniatures game, a more traditional land miniatures game. That I like
Yeah,
that.
it's
That's kind of
quite
interesting.
rare in historical wargaming.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. I've seen it in. I've definitely seen it in double blind wargaming
Hmm.
more, of course. But I like it. It's just a little kind of little taste of double blind without making you have to keep two copies of the
Yeah,
table.
we tried to anchor those ideas for those effects
Right.
in actual tactics used by
Right. Right.
armies.
That's
So some
that's what I was
decoys
trying to
with
get at.
some support workforce from the camp to fool the enemy that okay, we have some cavalry here.
Right. It,
No, they
it
just went home.
right. It feels
Yes.
like it definitely feels like you designed this as part of the rules. Was it pretty much? You might not have started here, but it definitely feels like it's a part of the rule set instead of just kind of tacked on.
Yeah, it was in the game design from the very beginning that
Very good.
yeah, there will be some reconnaissance phase to represent that ability. It is important, especially if you have armies like Crimean Tatars that are very dependent on their mobility of their recon to trick the enemy, not
Right.
just take open battle.
Right. That's great. I wanted to make sure to show that because it is kind of it's a bit of a unique offering with the rules. I thought. I did want to show folks just kind of like the basic, just the unit kind of composition and what, because I think it'll give people who have never played the original uh, an idea of what you were going for here. Let's go through this a little bit. I really like how you organize these. I definitely liked the levels of condition affecting well everything affects close and uh, firearm combat. And I don't know. You want to maybe kind of just walk through what we're seeing here and just how it's used in the game proper, just a
Of
little bit.
course. One of the main changes is to move from moving separate bases to moving entire units on the movement trace, and the unit card represent the entire unit, which is usually a few hundred men. And instead of counting wounds and things like that, we count disorder level of the in the unit. So there are four basic statistics that are permanent for the unit. It's movement speed, it's resilience, morale, and skill. But in the right side of the card, right corner, there are levels that represent conditions. Green is the best condition of the unit. Yellow, they're shaken. Red, they're almost broken. And on the black field, there is represented the number of disorder points. That means that unit is removed from the game. So if you're on, for example, yellow condition, you refer when you're shooting or fighting to the yellow space in the profile, but also some special rules work or don't work depending on your condition, which is also represented by those squares. So if you're in the yellow, you'll have less dice for attack, because we in this edition we try not to affect the statistics by some modifiers to what you have to roll, but we affect the number of dice that you have to roll, or some rerolls in times. And the other thing that you can notice is some order symbols next to the special rules, because orders is what determine what unit can do. And depending on the order, the actions are available or not available for the units, and some special rules, especially some special form of fire, are dependent on the order given to the unit. And there is difference between unit and group. Units are the main fighting force. Those are on the rectangles. Those are on the more traditional movement trays. And groups are on the rounded trays. Mostly commanders, but also sometimes some smaller units like Danish Snaphanar partisans or guerrilla fighters, or some Tatar scouts, units, groups of fighters like that are not full-scale units that can actually fight in close combat that would affect the battle. And they
And
have
those
they
are
have their own, yeah.
Those are targetable, right? I mean, so in other words, so those groups, those special forces, if you will, right? They're targetable still, right? They can be.
Yeah, there can be targeted. They cannot be, for example, charged.
Right.
Because you don't need to charge them to fight against them. If you just move your unit of few hundred men through them, you just roll for attacks, then they don't fight back because they have just a dozen of men, something like that. So there's nothing to talk about it in the terms. It's difficult to fire at them because there are small groups of people, not a big unit that is easy to fire with that old style weaponry, which were not very precise in firing.
Right. Right.
But
so the main use of the leader groups, right? The main use of those is to basically provide the special let's see, the special rules. Does that mean, is there anything else about the leader group other than like can you explain maybe what these are representing here?
Sure. So as I said earlier, units, what unit can do, the action they can take is dependent on the order. Groups are different. They are not affected by the order. You only place order token next to them to track whether they were activated or not. and action they can take are represented on the card. So, for example, here we have a Swedish colonel. He have one action move and 2 actions command, which means that he once in his activation he can move and twice he can give commands. During command action, he can spend any command points he wants to, for example, change orders to other units, remove disorder points from the units, and this he can do twice. So he can command, move, and command again. Some commanders have only one command action, which means they have to choose whether they will first move then command, or first command action then move, which makes it far more difficult to operate on the battlefield. And for example, some Tatar commanders have only one command action, but have 2 smaller movement actions, so they can move, give commands, and get back to safety. Some groups like those, like Plastune in Cossack army, which are some skirmishing sharpshooters, have action that allows them to fire range weapons. Some groups have some other little tricks that are referred to with an icon that refers to special skill on their card. But other than that, statistics and special rules on the card are similar to the unit cards. There is difference in icon of the type, because on the unit card you'll have infantryman, rider, or the cannon to represent the type, and groups are represented by a circle. That refers to the.
You mentioned recovery. Are there certain limitations to the amount of recovery you can have for a particular unit? And do you model anything along the lines of like more experienced units being able to recover quicker or more?
Well, there are no limits to recover beyond going to 0 disorder points, because since those aren't man losses, just because it was rare that man loss was actually that big that affected unit to be unable to fight. It was mostly some companies get mixed, some retreated, some other form of disorder gathering into ranks until units fled or capitulated on the battle. You can you don't reinforce it with new men, you don't revive them or something like that. Just bringing back order to your ranks so they will fight effectively again. What else is about that on the red condition, the unit is unable to charge or make reactions. So you don't need to completely destroy opponent unit on the battlefield to force to limit their ability to affect the battle. You can just bring them to the red condition, and you may risk to ignore them, but not fully, because if you give them enough time, they'll get back to the yellow condition and start attacking you again. Unit can make action that will allow them to remove some disorder points, but with specific order, or be affected by the commander in that way.
Very good. Would you like? I'd kind of like to talk just a little bit about just your basics of movement. Like, can you go a little bit over standard movement and formations and just kind of like how here I'll probably just keep it here for some of the basic things, but can you basically describe how movement is handled in the system?
Yeah. So one of the main things that was a difficulty in not just our first edition, but a lot of rank and file games that we played with, because we are also players, of course, was how time consuming was moving all those units on the battlefield. Changing formation and those pivoting. So we developed our dedicated rangefinder that has and that is shaped so it already includes the angles that you can do during movement phase. So on the one side there is an angle that allows you that shows those 45-degree you can take free during movement. And on the other side is that hook-like part that allows you for your pivoting. So you can also take those 45, or if you want to turn 90 degrees, you just pick a corner and pivot on that corner just by placing a rangefinder to it and take off your unit and pick it and place it back with the same corner. And 180 degrees, same way. You just mark it with your rangefinder and turn your unit around, so it will just switch edges. It saved us a lot of time. And also for a lot of things, we just use the movement line that is measured from the middle of the front edge. We call those points reference points, or ref for short. And most of the things are measured from those points, just to make it faster during the game, not to waste time to deciding, okay, whether it is 50% within the area terrain. No, we just look, okay, three ref points on 3 different edges are in the terrain, so the unit is within the terrain. Things like that.
Just wanted to look around and see how is let's see. I just wanted to show.
Oh, here you can see that movement on the right side in the examples are this 45-degree that you can use just the fact that it's angled and the end of the rangefinder to easily move your unit with that pivot included. But charging works a bit differently than normal movement. To give wider area that can be affected by a charge, while still not allowing for free turns for the unit, we decided that charge is not restricted by that 45-degree angle like movement. Instead, you just need to have the opponent in your front space of the unit and be able to get them in range. So it's similar to shooting. I just, for reference, keep in mind, okay, if you charge, you just shoot your man into the enemy. So it's on the same rules mostly are applied to determine whether you can charge or whether you can shoot, which is also nice to avoid some situations when you should be able to shoot the unit that can charge you, if you're in similar ranges, of course.
Oh, I was just noticing this one rule. So you can't charge in a way that'll overlap the zone of control of another unit. Is that correct?
Yeah, the units have 1 inch zone of control, and you cannot
And the charge
cross.
against another. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some small exceptions for situation where the units are lined up, so it would be impossible to charge some unit otherwise. In that case, you can still charge those other units, then may choose whether they are staying in combat or moving away, just not to exploit that zone of control rule to create situation when you are not able to charge unit that you should be able to charge otherwise.
I'm trying
Yeah,
to
and
see. Oh, this is interesting. Yeah. So it's so the initial roll for close combat is just the attacker's attack rating, right? Number of dice as far as tests are concerned, and then for each condition, you basically try. These are D10s, of course. You're trying to roll under your target based on your condition, but if you score.
The number of dice you roll is dependent on your condition, but you always roll for skill.
Yeah.
So you'll have determined skill, for example, 5 for your unit. So this is the most common skill level, and on your depending on your condition, you take that many dice. So, for example, I have on green condition I have 6 dice. On yellow I have 5 dice, but still I have the same chance on each dice to succeed.
Yeah, we'll look at an actual unit. It might help.
Yeah.
Let's see.
So the skill is the star.
Right.
So it's fixed for the unit. And if you check the, for example, melee profile, you have lower and lower amount of dice on the lower conditions, and in the black field next to the melee is amount of dice you roll additionally if you have the impetus, if you are charging or counter charging, you have more dice to roll.
Very good. I like the rule set a lot. It's fresh. I think it's new. It's definitely has some good modern features to it. I need to play test it more myself to get into some of the more advanced things, but it's a great rule set from what I can tell. So
nice to hear that.
So back to the Kickstarter real quick before we stop. I just wanted to go back over these levels. So again, if you pledge 59, you're saying you receive the books. But am I right? I might have missed this before, but if I only pledge 59, I also get a starter set for one player. That's correct. Is that correct?
No, you choose whether you would like the book set or single player starter set, because they are in the same.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify that because I was a little.
Yeah.
But you would still have access to the PDFs on your site if you chose to go. If you were trying to be cheaper just because you had a budget and you wanted to go towards the sets, you can buy the sets and you would still be able to access the PDF rules to play the game.
Yeah, the basic rules are in the PDF. On our website is Army Builder, Army Creator that allows you access to the composition of the army lists and stats for the units. And there is that single scenario for entry, so you can try the game with that.
So when you go through the process of, let me say, if I started here, but I also wanted the rule book, there's a way to just add it on. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, cool. That's what I wanted to make sure too. All right. Well, they're absolutely beautiful. The models are beautiful, and the rule set I think is pretty darn sound. From what I can tell, I need to play test it myself. I want to do some play testing of it. But
We
seems like a great game, and
yeah, we also have a video tutorial in form of Academy on our YouTube channel. So there's also that point to start to get familiar whether this rule set is something you're interested in, and how some of the rules work in practice. So we tried to make it as accessible both for new players and for players that started with first edition and need to find themselves in the new reality, because the second edition is it's still by fire and sword, but it is a new game. There are still those characteristics unique for by fire and sword, like those reconnaissance phase, that order system, that because the orders you set at the beginning of the battle pass for the on the next rounds unless you change them with your commander. So that was always in our game as one of the main ideas behind the games. So those two feelings are constant, and well,
are there?
the period, because
Yeah,
the second half of the 17th century is not that explored in wargaming.
yeah, absolutely. I agree. But I think it's not only a colorful period, literally, but
Yeah.
um,
Especially on the eastern side of the Europe, when you have
right,
Ottoman armies that are really colorful, not just that Western style that were quite
right,
similar
absolutely.
between many
Yeah,
armies.
I've always been attracted to like the middle periods, like the transitional periods, and this is very much, I would say, what you would probably even consider either late
Mhm.
Renaissance or early modern, right? Yeah, in some,
Yeah,
it's slowly moving into early modern, into the Musket era,
yeah.
which is it's very interesting time period, I think.
Yeah,
And
the Muscovite armies are interesting here because of the both old type units and newer westernized units were in that time at use at the same time. So there's quite a nice difference between those units, not only in miniatures, but also, for example, it's represented in the condition of the units, because that older style units were more numbered more soldiers, so those conditions are longer, but their skills are more old school than newer type units that are less numerous but have more modern tactics available.
I like it. I like the rule set a lot. There's enough. There's just enough uniqueness. Sometimes rule sets in this kind of interim period don't do one of the things well, I guess is one way to put it, right? They kind of they are usually developed from a medieval period, a medieval set, and then they tack on firearms. I feel like this was very much kind of designed from scratch for this period, and
Yes.
for these armies in particular in this area, in this region. So that's
Yes, it was from the very beginning. It was designed. Okay, we're working on this period, on
yeah,
that 17th century, middle
right,
and second half, and let's make it as to feel as fluent and as historically accurate as
yeah,
possible at
yeah.
the same time. Of
some,
course, there are some balance that had to be taken.
right,
We could not always do everything that we would like to, because it would simply negatively affect the gaming experience. So sometimes you need to give up on some wonderful things you like to add. But
right. I
we
feel
play
like
tested it a lot. We were in beta phase before. Closed beta tests. We took a lot of feedback. We decided to step back to alpha, rewrite some parts, get back to closed beta, and now we moved to Kickstarter and that open beta just to fix those clarifications in some rules, not to flood people with FAQ and erratas on the release
right.
date.
Well, very good. I wish y'all a lot of luck on the best luck with the Kickstarter itself. I hope to possibly I might do a play test with Tom, who did some of the graphic design on the book. I hope to get a couple maybe play tests up and kind of let people see a little bit more of the rule set in action, just kind of help them decide whether to dip their toes in the into By Fire and Sword 2. I definitely will be backing it, so I'm looking forward to it. I tend to like to get in as skirmish and then kind of build myself up slowly, and I'm sure everybody else does. We all love so many different genres. It's hard to do all of them justice and how much we
Yeah,
want to buy.
we tried
But
to make it easier because to those both to the two-player starter set and to single-player starter set, there are expansion set that transforms your skirmish force from that first starter into a full task force. So
awesome.
you can, with just one additional set, have
Right.
that task force level army.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for talking
Thank you
about the
too.
game, Piotr, and I'm sure I'll be in touch again. I'll let you see the results of our play tests, and you can tell us all the rules we did wrong. So that's what I always want.
I'll be happy to help. And
But it looks like what I will say is it looks like it's very approachable. It's easy to understand. Pretty much in one reading, I didn't feel like any section was questionable. You know, I felt like it was very clearly written, and I feel like if you know, a single read is enough to get going on it. You might have to look up a few things just because you forget them, but it seems pretty well laid out and easily accessible to get to the different sections that you need to get to. So, all right, good luck with the Kickstarter, and
thank
thanks
you
again.
very much. See you again soon.